All right, my name is Chris Phillips, and I'm in Windows Server. And for those of you who are hiding in the back row, it's going to be hard for me to talk to you because you're behind pillars. I apologize for this space. I'm going to go through and talk about, kind of our evolution as a company and where we're at. I started with the company in '94. I'm a retread. I left for a couple of years at the turn of the last century and came back in 2002. I've been back for 12 and a half years. It's a pretty dramatic change in how we worked and behaved in the 90s versus, where we've been, especially in the last 12 years. And I kind of want to go through and talk about that today with you and how we look at standards, open source, interop, and how we've evolved as a company and where we're at today. I mean, the company has dramatically changed. In the 90s, we were totally Windows-centric, and we produced a lot of standards and worked in standards bodies, but it was really driving our standards, and that was kind of our attitude. And as we evolved, especially in Windows Server, into the enterprise, our customers were continually saying to us, hey, you have to adopt and interop with the products and standards that we need. This isn't going to work for us. Like the pure Microsoft stack isn't mature enough yet for the center of the data center and in mission critical. And those systems were all built in Unix, the various flavors of Unix, and even potentially one day Linux. Because Linux, like us, if you go back to 2000, was not cracking the center of data centers. And so we had to start really examining how we work with standards bodies as well as how we work with other companies. We kind of adopted this mantra of, hey, play well with others. Of course, listen to the customers, because if you're not listening to your customers, you just are a loser and you're going to fail. And and then, more recently in the last 10 years, think about openness with respect to the cloud. So I'm going to kind of dive into these. We've done a lot of investment in standards bodies. You'll find we are not in every standards body. We kind of have to be judicious in our resources and think about where we can add value and where we can receive value, and not every organization provides that. But we do cover a large number of what we think are the major organizations. Clearly we've embraced open source, both internally as well as how we work in the community. We have pretty large investments. We make lots of contributions, and I'll go into more detail on that, and enabling open source on all of our platforms. So like standards bodies, we're in over 150. It's a hard thing to count across Microsoft because there's no one in charge of actually tracking this. But these are ones we know where we've cataloged our work. And we have people who chair or are involved in a lot of the working groups in these standards bodies. Just in my organization alone, I can rattle off at least a half a dozen people who chair major standards, many of which are not ours. And that's quite exciting for us to work with your companies and other companies on evolving standards that will help our customers and as well as our products do better interop, as well as providing exciting technology into the world. And this isn't just something that Microsoft, one team does at Microsoft, like Windows Server or the Windows organization. It crosses the entire company. We have probably the largest broadest ecosystem, meaning we span not only consumer, but we also span all the way through the enterprise as well as governments. And so, as a company, we have a tremendous responsibility. We in Windows Server, because we land on basically more than 2/3 of all the servers in the world, have a responsibility to the world in how we, what we build and how we work, and how we work with the entire ecosystem. And so, here's just kind of numbers. They basically say we work at scale, and we affect developers, customers, and partners all over the world. Digging into specific, how many people know what OneDrive is? OneDrive is, for those who don't, is a cloud service, which is a data store where your files come off your consumer devices and are stored in the cloud for backup, as well as to be able to share with other people. And used to be called something else, which we're no longer able to call it that, and I can't even remember the name. I apologize. It's now OneDrive, and it's across all of our consumer devices. And interoperating with that and being able to have other data sources and services interoperate with that is very key to our success. And we've been involved in a lot of the standards to make that possible, especially with our brothers and sisters in the Office area, because that's a lot of great standards have emerged there to be able to transform and interoperate with documents of all types. The phone, probably our biggest contributions there are around HTML5 and adopting standards so you can build on one device and target others. If you haven't noticed, in the last couple of years, we've embraced non-Windows platforms. My organization does development on both Android and Apple platforms to build clients that hook to server. So an example of that would be Remote Desktop. We shipped on Mac OS, iOS, and Android last year. We're really committed on our phone business to make it so that you can develop on those platforms, which are frankly have a bigger base, and be able to target a Windows phone as well. Office is really blown up in the last couple of years in terms of going from something in the 90s, which was kind of a more Microsoft proprietary formats, into today, where you can interchange documents from a whole host of third parties, and based on standards that we've provided and or adopted in the industry. I'm moving really fast because this is like over an hour's worth of content, and I'm supposed to be out of here. So if you're wondering, try and zoom through these. In server, we document all of our protocols. Many of you are here probably because of that, and we've been doing that for since the late 90s. And we've been doing Plugfest on Interop. And whether that's on SMB or it's on any of the networking protocols, it's something that we're committed to, and we've been kind of at the forefront. I would say that from a company standpoint, I don't know of any other company in the world that actually runs these events or does this kind of work in the community as broadly as we do. My organization is probably is not the only organization doing open source work, but when it comes to pure Linux related work, we own that, which is kind of an interesting thing. You're probably thinking to yourself, wow, the Windows Server organization actually has the developers who do Linux work and make Linux contributions. It is something that we feel really strongly about because our customers in the enterprise are generally mixed environments. People coming off of legacy Unix systems either port it to Windows or they port it to Linux, one or the other. And so we've been involved with Linux and making major investments in the Linux community for a number of years. Obviously, all of these languages and or middleware are things that we use and provide through our services and provide on our platform. Just kind of mentioned this. Our goal is to make Linux a first-class citizen on our hypervisor so that people don't need to build two stacks. A lot of our enterprises literally build two stacks environment. They build a Windows stack environment and they build a Linux stack environment. So we've been working a lot over the last couple of years to get people to just take their Windows environment and put Linux on it. That seems to be more comfortable and there's tremendous cost savings in that. To do that, one of the things that we do is we take innovation that we've done in Hyper-V with Windows and we actually port it to the Linux kernel. We have a lot of examples of that. Just quick one, we added dynamic memory as a feature a couple of years ago, a couple of releases back, and then what we did was we enabled that in the Linux kernel so that you could have dynamic memory for your guests, and we put that in the kernel, and then what happens is the distros, Conical, Red Hat, Oracle, SUSE, pick it up and distribute it through their distributions. So for the last few years, we're one of the largest actual people who make contributions into the kernel. We don't really blow our horn too much about it, but we have a lot of great engineers who are highly respected in that community. And we've earned that trust in the community such that Linus and people actually call us and suggest we do work here or there or ask us to lean in on issues. And I feel really proud to have gotten to that level. Here's some examples of distros that we support with the companies who own these distributions. That's something else that really changed over the last 12 years. Now, 12 years ago, if you called us up and you said, hey, I'm running this in my environment, we'd go, well, we can't help you. Like, we can't spell Unix or Linux. Today, if you're an enterprise and you call up, you have support with Microsoft. We'll dig in and help troubleshoot by getting experts from whoever your distro is on the phone with us, and we'll work together to resolve that. And it's something that is working really well. Just to give you an idea, there are places in the world where on Azure, as an example, we have more than a third of the VMs that are running on Azure in those environments are running Linux. Some distribution of Linux. And Azure, of course, is a Windows Server-based environment. It runs our hypervisor and Windows Server for its PaaS layer as well as for a lot of the IaaS. We also went back and did a number of the legacy Unix, although what we see is a drop-off through time of kind of the right side. We still see a lot of BSD systems, especially embedded. And so our work tends to be more in there. One thing that you will see on here is Oracle. Maybe you missed it, but last year we signed an agreement with Oracle where we would do joint support on their versions of Oracle Linux, including non-breakable, or there's some word that describes one of their Linuxes. They have, I think, 3 or 4 versions of Linux that they support. We We've adopted Hadoop for our cloud, and our SQL team has been doing a lot of work in this area. So you see Hadoop is available on Azure. It's also run on Windows Server in guest environments. Java, of course, is an important development language that also has a lot of interesting middleware that's been built based on it, like Eclipse. So we have that running on Windows Server, and it's available also on Azure as well. PHP, it's actually, we started writing PHP probably about 5 years ago, and it's something that we also have in our platform. So the things that emerge as standards by the development community and gain enough share and interest are things which we'll go make investments on and make sure that they're available across Plat. Do a lot of work with Samba, and I got to tell you that if you went back 12 years ago and talked about our relationship with the Samba community, it was not the best. And today, I'm really proud to say that we have a great relationship with the Samba community. We've done a ton of work, and in fact, a lot of the way we've done these Plugfests were driven by some of our Samba friends who helped us kind of debug how to do interop Plugfests over the years, and so it's been a great working relationship, and like their quote about the war being over is really important. In terms of open source, it's not just the Starnix community that we've embraced. We as a company have really changed in how we view a lot of our work internally, and thinking about how do we take pieces of our work, whether it's in Windows or in Office or other parts of the company in the client space, and make it so that our code is available for developers around the world to embrace and extend and make contributions. So we set up CodePlex, and it's been growing pretty big over the last 3-4 years. I can't think of any teams who aren't involved in putting stuff up into CodePlex. And this isn't just production code. It also includes tests, tools, and other contributions. We as a company are really interested in having super high quality completed scenarios for our customers. So making contributions here is a great way for us to help the myriad of third parties that are required to complete those scenarios get a jump on what we're trying to accomplish. Another area that we recently did in February, how many people know what Open Compute is? Okay. So Open Compute is an organization that got formed by a number of cloud companies, specifically what I would consider the smaller ones, like Facebook, Rackspace. I realize they're large companies, don't get me wrong, but I mean by small, meaning they don't buy servers and equipment at the level that we do, Google does, or even Amazon. For that matter, they don't buy it even at the space of like Alibaba, Baidu, or Tencent. And so in an interest of creating standards in hardware that large cloud providers could consume and agree on, they started, Facebook, Rackspace, and a number of companies started an initiative called the Open Compute. And they built a spec. Facebook donated their specs on the hardware that they were using, specifically around racks, as well as their server design and their storage design. We were asked to join that, and unlike the other large, if you think about the cloud space, you can think of it in shirt sizes. There's triple XLs, and the triple XLs are Amazon, Google, and Microsoft. And the reason why we're triple XLs is because we have over 1 million servers under management. You know, we literally purchase hundreds of thousands of servers a year to replace the ones that are aging out. And we're growing. And we have to do this because we have over 200 cloud services at scale. And we've been in the cloud business for 20 years. I mean, we were in the cloud business before the internet was big with MSN. For some of you with gray hair, you know, we were in it when you did it in X25. And that's what it was like when I got here at Microsoft. So because we operate at massive scale and we do it in a very open way, we've taken hundreds of companies through our data centers and showed them the evolution of our data centers from Gen 1 to Gen 4, and taught them how, you know, the process that we evolved, as well as the problems and how we overcame them. We decided that we would take the designs that we use for Azure, Bing, and some of our most largest cloud properties, and we would contribute those hardware designs. And so we joined Open Compute in February, I think it was at the end of February, and we made contributions in server and in storage, and we'll continue to do that. My boss sits on the board of Open Compute, and that was something else that we did, and we've been really leaning in. We have in my organization a peer of mine who actually runs a hardware design team, who builds hardware does design for our large cloud properties, and designs Azure's hardware, which is also adopted by you know, the other large cloud properties. So we as a company are moving towards more standardized hardware, because in large data centers where you're going to buy 20 racks of compute and 20 racks of storage as your minimum order quantity, it has to be homogeneous. I mean, you just can't have a different rack. You go crazy when you're putting up, you know, 200 racks. So we're very involved in this, and we're bringing our cloud designs there. And one of the interesting things about it is that some of the, what I would consider very large or XL players in the cloud space can adopt these designs and buy them from, you know, OEMs and potentially even ODMs if they're at that kind of volume, to build large homogeneous clouds. You know, been doing a lot of work with SUSE. We do a lot of work with Conical, a lot of work with Red Hat, all the large, really the largest distros in the world. And it depends on where in the world. And since we operate Azure around the world, different regions have different affinity towards specific versions of Linux. So you can go up on the Azure gallery and find those versions in the gallery. Listening to customers. I mean, we've always been a very customer-focused company, and really the point of this is we recognize the fact that most of our enterprises, you know, if you look at the Fortune 5000, most of them have mixed environments. You know, if for no other reason, even if they're really a pure Windows shop, companies are dynamic, they're constantly buying companies. We buy companies. Sometimes we buy companies and they come in and they're, you know, running on a Linux environment, and they're going to be on there for a couple of years before they port, or we might decide we're not even going to bother porting because we'll just run them in Azure if it's a cloud property in that environment. But this recognition to be a player in the enterprise space, by definition, means that you have to embrace a mixed environment. And turning to the cloud, you know, I talked about some of the leadership stuff that we've done. Just to put it in perspective, we've been in this for over 20 years. MSN was, and a lot of the properties that we put up there, 20 years ago and 18 years ago were at scale. Actually, when I got here, the internet, like the intranet, and the internet was being run under some, engineer's desks in '94. But we had a pretty large X25 network. We quickly turned that over and put that on the internet. We operate massive scale and data centers around the world. We probably have the largest ECN network in the world. We deal with just Azure alone in 89 countries. Not to mention Office 365 or Xbox Live or Bing or any of the other. We invest billions of dollars in data center and infrastructure every year. Literally having to buy hundreds of thousands of servers and switches and exabytes of storage capacity. And by doing that, we learn a ton, and we take those learnings and we try and bring them down to, what we call private clouds or the enterprise space, as well as to hosters. Of course, we do tons of certification so that we can be allowed to run our services in countries or provide it to governments around the world. So this cloud experience, we're really blessed because we're the only company in the world who operates at massive scale clouds, and we can take learnings from what that means in both architecture at the hardware layer all the way up through the stack through applications, and we can take it and bring it back into the products we build for other segments of the market, whether it's SMB or enterprise. And for me running Windows Server, this has been a tremendous benefit. Azure is Windows Server, not only in the guest, but in the host and in the hypervisor. What they do, obviously, to operate at the massive scale that they do is they wrote a lot of and automated all of their management infrastructure. And they do that because the scale that they operate in, you cannot have humans involved. It's just simple as that. A bunch of people here are with switch vendors, so imagine having to do over 100,000 switch, configurations a month. That's not possible for humans to do. It's just beyond the capacity of humans doing it without messing it up. And if you let an army of humans make that level of switch changes in a month, you're guaranteed to have failure. So what Azure has to do is basically write automation and take humans pretty much out of the equation everywhere they can. So that's what they do. But the basis of Azure is, Windows Server 2012 R2. All the other services at massive scale are all run on Windows Server as well. So this really just talks about, taking enterprise needs and Azure's needs, and because of doing that, we have a lot of common tools and technology that we use for, identity, Vert, DevOps, and we do that, and we can basically provide technology to what we consider the three major clouds. And those clouds are people's private cloud or their enterprise cloud, a hoster cloud, because we recognize the fact that the service provider business has been alive and well since the 70s, and it's not going away. Companies either have regulatory or compliance reasons to be able to use a specific hoster, or they want to use a hoster who has subject matter expertise in their industry and their business. And they've been doing it for 30, 40 years, and we don't expect that to change. There are people who are very specifically provide hosting services for governments around the world. And that's really important value that they provide. They really understand those local issues. And because of that, we see movement to public clouds like Azure or even AWS as something that, won't be possible. So building platform technology and tools and data stores and things that they can use to build applications that satisfy that environment, we believe is here to stay for many years. In fact, I personally have been in this game since the 70s, and I've been blessed. I've got to go through a number of transitions. I actually cut my teeth on a service provider. In fact, everyone cut their teeth on service providers unless you happen to work for some really large environment that had a lot of money, because you just couldn't afford a mainframe, right? So you did time sharing. And that's how my generation started out in computers. It's kind of fun to come full circle through, mini computers and PCs and distributed systems back to, these massive clouds and back on a service provider. Well, although we don't call them that now. So we take that innovation and we, do it in a way where we use all kinds of tools and technology that is both our own as well as that are standards and in a lot of cases open source. And we build apps in this environment. So, our commitment with Interop is something that, we've done since the courts decreed it. And now that we're kind of out of that era, we continue to do it because of the fact that it's great engineering practice. And we learned that, it's a force multiplier to work with all of you. And that's the bottom line. We get better quality products by working and doing interop work with the industry than just doing it on our own. You guys file sometimes really gnarly bugs that we probably wouldn't have discovered if we didn't have your help. So I, for one, really appreciate you making the commitment to come here today and spend some time with us and attend so that you can build great products and enable our customers with wonderful experiences. And you can work on with us, helping us with Interop. It's super important to us that you are successful, and it's super important to us that we get feedback and we get suggestions, and we also you sometimes find bugs in our products, not sometimes, frequently, and we appreciate that because it creates a higher experience, a higher quality experience for our mutual customers. We've been averaging 5 to 6 of these events a year. In the recent years, we've taken them out of just Redmond and started running them around the world into, both the Asian theater as well as the, Europe, African theater as well. And that's been important because some people couldn't travel. As well as, it allows us to get further reach into smaller organizations as well. And we're going to continue to do that. So, you have our commitment. I would argue that I don't know any other company, and if you have one, I'd love to hear about it, who actually does this work this broadly around the world across this many areas or this big of surface area. And it's something that we're committed to doing. We've learned over the years that it's great engineering practice for us. Lots of tangible results. I know that I've spoken to executives in a bunch of different industries that really actually kind of depend on banging out their products through this work. And so I know it's real. I know it provides a lot of value. One thing, though, I do want to stress is we built a product and shipped it called Message Analyzer. And it's a strategic product for us. We're making lots of investment in that. I think we've had about 70,000 downloads, roughly. I hope I'm right on that. And so it's getting adopted. But you're going to see that we make big investments in that. and in not only our protocol work, but in a lot of other work. And we're using it a lot in support to build templates, to kind of pattern when we learn about root cause and what's going on with our customers. We're extending it so that it'll be multi-machine capable. We're doing a lot of investment in this area. So any team at Microsoft that's building a protocol is probably involved in using Message Analyzer and building OPNs and plugins of their protocol to use that tool. So if it's a tool that you haven't been exposed to yet or haven't learned yet, I strongly suggest you do. So my plug for that. I already mentioned this. We'll continue to do this. We're trying to average, a half a dozen Plugfests around the world a year. We do them also in some specific organizations. We work really closely with SNIA and Storage, Kerberos. So we also do it in conjunction with specific orgs where we know we can get a large group of people together to look and deep dive in an area. Another thing that we're going to be doing more of, I think, in the future is providing our tests out into the community. We're doing a lot of test automation. It's been a question since I came back 12 years ago about whether we would share tests that we've written and the automation that we've written with the industry. And we've had issues in whether we should do this or not, what the quality is of our tests, and whether we were proud enough to put them out there and stuff like that. And was there IP and blah, 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 and lots of debate. And for the most part, we're kind of over that. So it's up to individual teams and what they have and how we can provide that. But I think you'll see a movement at Microsoft in general to share more and more of our tests that we've invested in. We make huge investments in automation, and it would be something that I, for one, want to try and get more into the open source community and shared out. Our specs come out very regularly. We have a large group of people. Some of these documents are gigantic. I think the Office group dropped like 60 to 80,000 pages of specs on the world over the last few years. So we in Server have probably done easily that. So there's a large body of written work, and we really appreciate if you find bugs in this, our protocol docs. We appreciate that because we turn that around as fast as we can and get it, those bugs fixed. So, some recent stuff that we've released. We're doing this kind of all the time. We don't wait for large boundaries, although when we do a version of the operating system, we do drop a lot of docs on that event during the milestones. But generally, as we're developing stuff and as we move to more continuous development and faster cycles, you're going to see more documentation coming out kind of on a continuous basis from the company. So I encourage you to stay informed, stay connected, because you'll be seeing information rolling out from us on a more frequent basis now that we've also sped up how we're doing releases. So that's it. I'm over, but I'll answer any questions if people have those. All right.
Well, thank you, Chris.